Namo Sangaya. Namo Guru Me. Namo Bidaya. Namo Dharamaya. Namo Sangaya. Namo Guru Me. Namo Bidaya. Namo Dhammaya. Namo Sangaya. Kande lanje gwenje dogane raga shosa bonde chonzenze chöje nyamo gwenje losan sedanje ba ne de she so de ye ngo se de be de che ze ma ma che be zo ga ta lu de be so no she jo che dara sambe Sai Jie Shi Jie Chai Wai Avan Do Zo Naman Da Vi Zi Yan Le Xian Ba Yi Sui Zhu Gu La Chai Dui Mi Nga Yang Tai Mi Na Su Gu Ra Da Si De Ba Do Mi Nu Tian Ba Ra Tan Su Xi Ni Sai Bi Ge Wa Dian Dan Zhu Wa Gu Lai Kan Bian Da Qie Ba Lai Qie Zi Lo San Chai Ba Yi Dian Bi Nian Bu Rian Du Sai Jie Xiu Mi Mi Zi Vi Tere Jie Jie Ri Si Zhi Mi Jian Bi Wan Bu Jian Bi Tu Bu Ma Lu Zhuan Zi San Vi Da Kan Jin Ke Bi Zui Jian Zong Ka Ba Lo San Chai Bi Xia Lai Su Wa Mi Mi Zi Vi De Jin Jin Ri Jie Mi Jian Bi Wang Bu Jian Bi Yang Tu Bu Ma Lu Zhuan Zi San Vi Da Kan Jin Ke Bi Zui Jian Zong Ka Ba Lo San Chai Bi Xia Lai Su Wan De Mi Mi Zi Vi De Jie Jie Ri Zhi Mi Jian Bi Wang Bu Jian Bi Tu Bu Ma Lu Zhuan Zi San Vi Da Kan Jin Ke Bi Zui Jian Zong Ka Lo San Chai Bi Xia Lai Su Wan De Ba Dian Za Vi Lai Ma Rian Bu Ji Dai Zui Ji Bu Ru Bi Mi Dian Zhu La Ka Dian Jian Bi Oi Ni Jie Song Ku Song Du Ji Wen Zhu Zi Du Ba Dian Za Vi Lai Ma Rian Bu Dai Zu Nian Ga Ra Bi Mi Dian Zhu La Ka Dian Jian Bi Ku Ni Jie Zong De Choi Dan Tu Mo Ngui Zhu Zi Du So Ba Dian Za Vi Lai Ma let me remind every one of ourselves here to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation. We call it bodhicitta motivation, or the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should participate in this Lamrim discourse, discourse on the stages of the path leading to enlightenment by Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa. Allow me to read about page 2 from the great Lamrim Chemo, the great treatise on the stages of the path, volume number 3 in the English translation, page 301 in the middle paragraph, to give you the blessing of lineage oral transmission first, followed by explication.
Kita number jewandi jewa number de tanju de wale disi jewa me wala tembaran de nan ti tse de jema de venye de menje motion je pula so wa ta nyawa hyeon jo wa je na te ji jewa jo me wa ta wa ju ji we ta da na de wa me je ke Teta minga wa jemala so ba da jemala so ba ta tang ne xie do xie song ba xie so ba so ten ran xie yu mi so ye ran te za na ran xie mi so ye ran xie yu mi so ran xie yu mi so ye Riki je jumat samje tong ya ba so na chong yin jiwa riba di na para je na ye ke bi shu du ngo no la jumat ya tong ya ba ze ma ne ye ba je go be chu me de xie ja be de ba di ti je za yong je ba na ngo ba na ya ra ye zhe ba me yo ye so ze ne ngo ba na la jumat de de lang ma ti ma za ba ti ye lang maro le ba jo ro she yume to lang maro le go ba so be she ro de jumati ya rang ngo de be ran she ke ba na re ba de she be je she je nya she je ma nya ba de de ri be te me de je ni yu go la so yu ba je yu go la so yu go la rang she yu ba ze ba mi je yang Nyugula rashi mewa tere denya bada rang shi je tong be no jima da buru denya no ri be ga gu jima chung je yin je we tada me be jima da jima ta we tong yo ba ziba yang jin si je ngo xin yo be do ro go nyam de ziba ni yi min yin de da wei na den zhe jing ye ba ta ji cha re me wei ju mo shi mo ju wei shi shi de ga mong de xie xie do de yo ji ma da bi tong ye ba da den ba ye ba ni ma xie ba yin ba ra dong me sao xian yang yu jie de re be se wa na ming du nyam ba tang bo zhong xie be de ne zhong gen la yang de da zhe wo ra tong le Tong ne nge ba je tong me ba nge yang yo ba me be be khang la yang de me nge ba xie cha sa me ba ra so ne no pe me de so me no cha re ya cha wa yang ran xie me da ye me zang ma ja ba ri ge tong je ga wa la de yo jo be de be dong ba yang den ji xi be dong ba yin lo de no de do be chang be No pimpi de shawa yang jima da ba tong te me no ma de na ri ba na ba je ba na ka za la so ran wo je be de de du ji jung se jang men do nya ba da de la de na jang pimpi de be be de shawa 텐부드 체라와 좀 마인제 데다와디 지미 데다와디 오메 춥다라 메시 런심이베 추유던 베추 텐두 테바담제라 모야 가사네라 오데 런심 마레 바라 킥바다 런심 메베 코살와서 바티니 레소보 보다 지분 용보 조발이 예반야 땡땡中的 대나무소 조드 인조디 인도티 시다잠주 송에 어메다와 히디니가에나 데라와시 많이 나타베 녀버 시와정도 조조로 녀버 송도 조로 조조로 녀버 시다르 시와정디 땡녀버 조도 조 돈미사와르 니가라 top 중소 녀바 전부 제어 제베다베다 디제레 녀바양 녀버 양노랑 오즈베 젠베 로도당 다다당 오버여버다 타라동라 양는 오버노모 동시에 바바탄 더버 젠베 군데베 또 셰다다 오버메버다 타라동라 이노 대단한 딩이 저월에 대제 딩 도주 대바에 저와테네 딩신 쇼디 셰세바도 민타부테 델라미제 소야 셰와 미심제 메던 쇼 메던 소정 미니데 쳬는네 오아 위치진가 예마다고나게 론저디 신도저신 미규신 민가 지된데요 신네 지대신데 퍼진저베 메로 메장 레시나네 노요 취미사 노요 로 메장 레시나네 집에서 코와나야 건너린지 코와나양 건너 리브미 따바라마에 시바민주르데 레소메제네 와다지메 태양시네 리브민주메 현재 시바 조와조미 제자와동쇼 쇼부 거서 리비에 미정 최는 기마다부 까나게 렌지브 나면 중에 레시니 벤지브 릭바테 뉴 민조 메라 신지시에 비베 레지지브 거서 신지 초와 뉴에 마시바동 체와메바 소바다부 예바예바 샤오스 다 춘좀데 디인사 카르사리서데 다들 시잡을 시야 지레 시잡을 농디 거들 거사 대신 저저 또 유마시부터 저기 모션이 보다는 마이노 게데 넘버 제바 디 제와 탐제도 까발레 디시 제와메 바템버데는 티제디 유마데 위니디 민줄치 모션이 보러서 봐 타기 녀와시원 조시나 티테진 조원조메 바태와지 지구에 대다 다템버 미시게 대다 민고 유마라서 봐 타다 네 셰도스 다 거기 들으셔. 그래서 냠샤 나갔다부. 제도 기마터서 샤 가르세나. 들으세. 땡 메바. 디렉 빼 말이스. 마션 분노 시시. 다 마션 분노 이르서 땡 메베라와.
나래.
어쨌든 마션 분다부 뭐인시 기마터부 인시는디 시자발인디 개발 시샤스. 어디스다 다다 티스거리. 그가마서나 다 누디 뭐 해야지고 어디 딱동서 가르사. 니는 맨 타니도 메시아지 키로 어디까지 말했어. 런신이 말을 말이제래. 애니카를 때는 내가 말했어. 때는 내가는 무슨 분을 예로 같아 말했어. 이게 맞다 그랬어. 그 가제 유미 개발시기도 와. 다디 형이 개발해야 돼. 애네 야흉도 저리 바로 뭐 기다바르기 뒤에 개발시하고 온 거라. 그 맞아서 제단 단다 때문에 세야지 계셔도 연구를 와. 근데 니네 제를 무시고 니게다 이 야숑다 우르야세 흉마 룩니 어디 케버세케 가세 눈 되게 돈이 되고셔로 와. 어쨌든 이 예바다 가서 네 러시 뭐저 시딘데 히케링도 와. 다 현다시는 유신이 러시 저 러시 맨 메르시 라고로 시다 디케버지야 되다.
Geshe read from the middle of page 301, volume number 3, the English translation of Lamrim Chemo, to page 304, and start with the first paragraph on the top. And now back to page 301, where you find a line cited from great Indian master Aryadeva's 400 stanzas, or we call Shibjapa, Chatuk Shedak. As Geshe explained, what we talked about a couple of weeks ago is this, that when we are in a meditative state, nothing but focused on the emptiness, our experience is described as being in a space-like meditative state. Nothing really appears for that mind in the meditative equipoise on emptiness. But as we come out of that meditative state, we are in a post-meditational period, provided that we have realized emptiness as it is. In the post-meditational state, things will appear to us like an illusion or maya, Yuma. Okay? And so then, some critics, they think that what you're really saying is that really nothing exists at all. But that's not the point. You're missing the point. And here Lama Tsongkhapa tries to say, you pay attention to the example that's being used by Aryadeva. He did not use the example of a son of a barren woman, isn't it? That's an example of something that doesn't exist, non-existent. He uses the example of an illusion, because illusions do exist, isn't it? A son of a barren woman is an impossibility. So therefore, when we say that in the post-meditational period, things could appear to you like an illusion, that actually affirms that things do exist. It does not mean that things don't exist at all. Then if that's the case, he could have said, well, that would be like a barren woman's child. But he did not, see. So there's a difference between the use of the examples. And because illusion does exist, is not an example for non-existence. And as Geshe explained, so even many great masters of early days in Tibet, they kind of missed that point. So then they subscribe to the view of nothingness. Well, if you are in the state of meditative equipoise emptiness, nothing exists for that mind except emptiness. And so therefore nothing exists at all. Well, the fact is that when you come out of that meditative state, things appear to you like an illusion, which means things do exist. Okay? So we have to really understand the distinction between existence and non-existence. If we blur the distinctions, then we can fall into the extreme of nihilism. We deny the existence of everything. And one of the challenges we find is often in the commentarial treatises of great Indian masters, Shastras, they really don't seem to, often differentiate between existence and non-existence. They just keep on using the terms as if, they don't qualify the terms by something. So then you don't know, exactly what's the distinction between existence and non-existent. But there are some areas where they are very clear about that. For example, Aryadeva in this particular case. So Lama Tsongkhapa did a marvelous job in the sense that he would research in the works of Arya Nagarjuna and his main disciples and say, where are those lines of passages where do really talk about the distinction between existence and non-existence? And so as Geshe said, that for the essentialist, when we talk about something existence, they automatically say, so it exists intrinsically. Okay? Then you say, you know what, nothing exists intrinsically. Then you're like, oh, nothing exists at all. Is that what you're saying? So how could it be? Things exist, see? Because they are not able to differentiate between the existence and intrinsic existence and non-existence and non-intrinsic existence. Okay? So for them, if something exists, it must exist in and of itself intrinsically. Once you refute that, well, nothing exists that way, they're like, so you mean nothing exists now? What do you mean? That's not making any sense, right? So that's the problem they got caught up with. So it is vital for us to be able to differentiate between existence and non-existence. And illusion is a great example because illusions, do exist.
Tēnā rāngi yume tsāwe rīkbē, rīkī yuma tsāngi tōng yabar sōna yā kyōng mēng kāsā, kyōng yīngi, rīkbā tī nāmbā chēni, rāngi kīkbē shūdi ngōpa nāngā, yuma tōng yabar zēmbā ni, yabar chē gōbē sē, kyōng mēng tīs. Tīs yō tā, tā tōng sē tī tā yī tī mō lā yī kāsā, yuma tsam chana ene chong yo re so ta rang shi me di tong yi mai ga de ro ro
La re
di re ma do che di jo le ya ene je do du ga de le ngen de tong yi do sa ene je do de on do sam lo ta ne ene rang yi ki be shu du ngo ba ene to ba sa ba sam di yo nge ba de le ge wa yo ma re
no. So the crux of the matter is this. When we are in the state of meditative equipoise and emptiness, right, nothing appears for that mind except emptiness. And emptiness that appears to it is what we call non-affirming negative reality, isn't it? It's a mega in Tibetan. Okay? And so the essentialists think that when we analyze things, when we said that nothing is findable intrinsically, that unfindability is translated in meaning that nothing exists at all. Okay. So nothing is findable intrinsically does not mean nothing exists at all. Okay. And so because nothing exists for that mind in the state of meditative equipoise and emptiness, now they think that, you mean like nothing exists at all? Because nothing appears for that mind except emptiness, right? And here, Arya Deva is not saying that in the state of meditative equipoise and emptiness, things appear to you like an illusion. If he says that, then you have a good point, because things should not appear like an illusion for your mind in the state of meditative equipoise emptiness. Because then what happens? Then your mind does not focus on emptiness. If it does, then that emptiness does not become mega, non-affirming negative phenomenon. It becomes affirming negative phenomenon. What he's saying is that when you come out of that meditative state, in the post-meditation period, things appear to you like an illusion. And there's no problem with that. Okay? And because as a matter of fact, that captures the concept how things appear to exist in one way and how do they actually exist in another way. Right? That's an illusion. Illusions looks like something, but it isn't that, isn't it? But nonetheless, illusions do exist. Yeah? So that's the crux of the matter here.
시작은 제발래 뒤에 제가 용수 깨와는 누구나 이런 힘주어 문제에 소소 누구나 제맛때 되니 상말려 봐라 저로 시 규메도 상말려고 송비 셔로 어디서 다들 내가지도 가서 다들 때문에나 이는 상말려서야 돼 차고도 쓰려와 때문에고 상말 용어로 제면 상말 용어로 다 예만 너희들 그 나와들면 지금 여기 알아 가지 예매 따라서 나야 요리 시바지야 요리 건지 통하지 리아지 요러와 제 뜻선상 이 때문에 말이라고 다 상말류고 라샤시 저와 이 다 뭐셔보다 분부라도 되는 그 매직이 뭐 커바가 상말이야 요 말와 어때 상말이야 요리 수도 어때 내가 다 내도 다 거지 다들 지야 일 비지스야 다 상마 요 말와 제대로 상마지요서
No. So we are on top of page 302, where we have a quote from Chandrakirti's commentary on Aryadeva's 400 stanzas. And so it reads, So when you analyze in this way, things are not established as intrinsically existent. Hence, the illusoriness of individual things is left as a remainder, unquote. So explanation given on that, this is a very important kind of a passage, is this, that through analysis, when we refute intrinsicness of things, right? So what we end up with is the non-affirmative negative emptiness here. But that emptiness does not mean that nothing exists at all. Okay? Nothing exists at all because something is left. And how do we know? The remainder is once you come out of that meditative state, things appear to us like an illusion. If nothing exists at all is left over, then what is there to appear? Because illusions have appearances, right? I mean, they appear as, Geshe didn't specify, like horses and elephants, and then, we like them, we hate them, we want them, we don't want. I mean, he didn't say all these details, but the perceptions do arise in relation to the illusory appearances. So something is there. Nobody can deny that, So the point here is, as, when we really miss that point, just like many early Tibetan masters, then we might end up with the view of nothingness, right? We said that in the state of meditative equipoise emptiness, nothing exists for that mind except emptiness. And emptiness is not an affirmative phenomenon, it's a non-affirmative reality. But that does not mean nothing exists at all, because once you come out of that state, things do appear to you like an illusion, right? If nothing exists at all, then they could have used other examples like the horn on the rabbit's head, right? The bunny's horn, or the barren woman's child, right? They didn't say that. They said like an illusion, like a maya.
Well, says there you go wrong, you go the wrong whatever wrong he came on. Ribati and the she Manyaba Tisi Rigbe te made the Jenny. You go wrong he about Zimba Mejayam. You go wrong he may about Den Yambata. Rangi Tombe no Yamata Den Yamba Yamna Rigbe Gagovi. It's Zimba Junjin. Teda maybe Yamata Buton Yabar Zimba Lion Yunzi Mushi Yabe Dorgos Yam Zimba Ni Yemini this Tissilo. Then you were to kick by any tea what did you see Manipur? Don't you thought you were going to consider Lord because of Parashi Major to city? Repeat me the Jane, you wouldn't see Yaban Zimba, Majayans, and usually, but I don't you thought they were going to use on Yaban Zimmerwalla.
No.
Then you will Raji me about the Yamata, the Lord, don't you double Lord, you would Raji me about the Dembarek yourself. Raji, there was no Jamata with Daniel. Not repair Gagavi, the Majonji Institute, this is the Tangi the Chibarwa. The Roshima was all Lord Tigger, you would Roshima about the Tata Resha said, young Roshimi, Yamata race, I think a lot in Zigumaris. Did you so? Lord, the Jonjeri, Jonjas, not only my God,
So we are on page 302, the second paragraph, the big one. So what you find stated there is that while our mind is in the state of meditative equipoise and emptiness, our mind is cognizing or realizing nothing but emptiness, isn't it? But the mind does not think in that moment, emptiness of intrinsic reality is the ultimate truth. That is the truth. Or the mind does not think that, although sprout does not exist intrinsically, it appears to exist one, but it doesn't exist in that way. The mind in the meditative state does not conceptualize and think those ways. And if it does, then that mind is erroneous perception, isn't it? Because then emptiness cannot be mega, non-affirmative negative phenomenon. It becomes an affirmative negative phenomenon, and that means you are really, you are not seeing emptiness. You must be seeing something else, isn't it? Okay. So for that mind, when our mind is nothing but experiencing non-conceptually, the emptiness of a sprout, right? Only emptiness exists for that mind, and it does not entertain any other thoughts. This emptiness is the truth. This is the truth, nothing but truth. So help me, whatever. It doesn't think that way, And it doesn't think that, the sprout appears as intrinsically existent, but it really does not. If it thinks that way in that meditative state, then that is an erroneous state of mind, because you're losing the emptiness. It does not think that way. Okay?
인지 대다 매베 기마다부 돈 여반 zembal라요 윤지지 용어시에베 돌고스 냠든 zem반니 이 메년데 대다 마이나 땡디게 예바탐지 샤르메베 쫑셔버지 샤르가 마운디 셰싱도스 다 카지 티게스워 다 돈이 더베 카디 아장장 되네 디 제점으로 지 랑데잖아 Gyemata no te shao de that no te ka sigurta. Ti no te ngushin res. But Gyemata no te ka lavino. In the demi chado, demi chasona, in the 10 days, Shasta never chagris, Sheda, Tita Kanje, demi in the 10 day take Marazita, go to Ladon, go to the Tisha, or the tissue that do this.
So what we just said is that when our mind is locked in that meditative state of equipoise and emptiness, it sees nothing but emptiness of intrinsic reality, of you name it, a sprout or whatever the case may be. At that moment, the grasping at intrinsic reality does not exist because the mind is realizing emptiness. The antidote is right there, present. But that mind is not thinking in any other way, right? It's not analyzing or thinking. It's just simply is absorbed into the emptiness. But if it thinks like, things are like an illusion, or emptiness is the ultimate truth, then it is not on emptiness. You see, the emptiness does not become a non-affirmative negative reality, which it is. Okay? Now, as you come out that meditative state, as we said, things appear to you like an illusion. Now, if the critics say, in that case, you should stop the appearances of things like an illusion, then you are basically saying that we should destroy the concept of dependent arising because things arise like an illusion, So why would you want us to, stop that kind of experience, how things appear to like an illusion? Because that means then you really destroy the whole concept of law of karma and its outcomes and cause and effect and all the dependent arisings.
They Gyemata don't hear about the demo even measure him. Yimbara don't miss out. Here you get the rigbe. Sewana Mundu Yamba Tambor Jongi. Ten Jungin la Dendra Tone, Mebara Yang Yeba Membe, Kanla Yang, Din Diminji, Yeba Chasa Mebar, Sone. No Pimidu Sone, say, no Charian. Rangi you made some Majaba. Repeat Tabji Kabar, then Chua Yimbe. Tende Tomba Yang, Tende Higbe Tomba Yin then the Meta Tena, Titobe, Changbe, Changbe, no Pimidu Shawayim. Yamata don't menos that in the Karsa. Don't miss out Sikarsa, this is the day. You must have you done any Dema Major Chekanza there. You must have you see the country Dema say. Dema men may say, or think Dema but the Yeva Thomas Lanshas. Here, usually the request see one, see citizen on the Timare. Season the Yavan Tinsley. Mundu Yamba, so there's up in the concert of the Subum the concert even so are those parts say, and the Mundu Yamba Tombo Mundu Lavi is taking on the Koa but of Shina, Lia de Yorata. What is what? Then the Chingay to the Raton said, that is something that Javashi concert I can do. In the Yule major concert, the Chingay that in the Hin Soji Shane in the Koa but the Jiggy was. A Kalayang, Dini, Yeva chazamewa songni, nama penpun tu songni, nama charawa yang si, nama penpun rupu si, penpun sina te karasiri na kanji da, kanji tonda mena chik, ta tongsang kona chik, kanya mewa kiti te, nama penpun si te yin sarwa. Rangshi yume de yume tsam ma sheba rikpe tamchi kakpa tenu, shunga yinpe, tende tongpa ya, tende shikpe tongpa yin la, tena te tokpe, changpe tse, nawa pimpi di shawa yang, yimatawa tong, ten me no se, oda tende sanne ni, ta nawa pimpi shawa di, jirang yile mi shiba di, yimatawa tong ma resi. Ma shiba ta, yimatawa da yibati ma shiba, rikpa tamchi kakpa tenu, rikpa tamchi pa minduk se. Shunga yinpe, tende tongpa yang, tende shikpe tongpa yin la, stata di mingla, tende shikpe tongpa se wata, kaji gaza ngu ma se sha, sitan pa chashi rivasi, chokze rivasi, tati chokze de, ni kangpa chokze rivasi, tokpang de rivasi, desi, iya yo ma ra, ta chokze minduk sa na, o jel ka tende shikpe tongpa se wata.
So we are on to page 302 still. It is the third paragraph, or the second paragraph from the bottom up. So where you find it stated, as Geshe explained, that if we do not differentiate between intrinsic reality and things are like an illusion, then we will find ourselves caught up in the network of nihilism, right? When we say that things don't exist intrinsically, they are like an illusion, then we think like, nothing exists at all. That's what you are saying. Okay, so we deny the existence of things. And then if we believe that is the emptiness, well, that's the state of nothingness, that's not the emptiness, So we have to be very careful with how we approach emptiness. So the crux of the matter, as we have emphasized over and again many times, is right from the beginning, we really have to do our best job to identify precisely the object of negation or refutation, gakcha. What is being refuted or negated in the theory of emptiness? If we are not sure about it, we are very fuzzy about it, then our analysis is going to be fuzzy, and fuzziness does not lead to, realizing emptiness. Okay? And as Geshe explained, that for example, people think that, well, analysis of emptiness is like, kind of easy, I can do it. Well, who is a person? Who am I? Well, I'm not my head, I'm not my face, I'm not my arms, I'm not my this, I'm not my that. Well, I'm none of these things. So I'm none of those things. So you end up, at the end, you don't find yourself, right? Because you're none of this. Then you think, well, that's not too difficult analysis, isn't it? So that's emptiness. Well, at the end, if you said, well, I couldn't find myself, well, that is a nihilist point of view. You are completely refuting, the conventional existence of you. And we got to be very careful with that, isn't it? When you do that kind of analysis, at the end, you will have some sense of vacuity, right? Because you lose yourself, like, I'm not head, I'm not tongue, I'm not nose, I'm not that, I'm not that. Well, I'm not there, There's some kind of a sense of vacuity, ordinary emptiness, and we think that is the emptiness. Well, we really goofed on this one, isn't it? So that's not what the emptiness is, and then nobody is saying that that kind of vacuity we think is emptiness is like an illusion, because that makes no sense at all, So that's why, as Geshe says, really right from the beginning, we got to do our best job to identify precisely in our mind what does intrinsic reality mean. If, hypothetically speaking, things were to exist intrinsically, including self, person, you just name it, that table, then we analyze it in that way. Not finding anything intrinsically existent is finding emptiness, isn't it? Okay? So we are not negating the existence of a table or a person per se. We are negating the intrinsicness that we attribute to self and the person. So there's a big difference between doing that kind of analysis which leads to emptiness versus simply thinking person is not head, person is not aggregate of feeling, person is not aggregate of discriminant awareness, person is not aggregate of well, then there is no person, right? At the end, well, it looks like I'm in some kind of emptiness. Like, well, that is a fuzzy, wheezy kind of emptiness. It's not emptiness.
그래서 저는 또뒤 저는 뒤쪽에 장비 너무 비밀이 샤와 영 지마다부 돈 때문에 저는 리뷰 넘버 제바나 강사라서 발라 랑 우치베 이딘디 두두 중세 자면도 고 냐바당 그럴 때는 너무 때는 장 비밀이 새로 점입니다. 가와 면제 진짜디 오메 주다라 무에신 런심이 수도베스 슈팅딩 테와 좀 담절로 원영 스테르스 거다 진짜 동다 단다 집에는 티타 페이지데요 다 그 슈얼 데발 때신 강갈 연구에서 거다 강사되시다 수분대 강사 머리 소대 머리 서 먼저 강갈 페이지 샤도 그러 어떻게 샤도 레라고 레스 거다 그 슈얼 좋은 지게들 시에서는 남자지 구하지를 나가야 레스 거러 다들 거라야 디건다 뭐시아지 다다 요도 때도 그때 와 디건 매인도 디건 민족스는 도디고로 다 건서 제르 뭐지고 다디네 까네 디그 팀 매번 말이 요레스 에네 런히 저와 요마르디 탄예도 똑배 딱서 요레스네 디네 십자지네 셔고로 셰도 다 건서 가다 제르미데 십자지다 다 강게 직보데 다 구하라 받으 샤려고 했다 शेना रंशी में जगह जगह गिमत तबे तक ये से आती ता कौन से गंगे जेरे बुजीरा गंगे तबे तक ये सका शिव में तबे तक ये लुते शाखा को औरवा ती शाखा औरवा ती शाखा आतेस शेता ता तो गैसा गंगा और जो जुली रंशी में शो ते खोआती को तेंदे सो ले ला और से को अले इन तासम के छजे थे ओ दी सही तो दो
So Geshe's explanation pertains to you find in the last paragraph. So before that, I think I missed reading the most important line, I thought. So that kind of emptiness, where we think that, well, person is not his head or her head, her aggregate form, feelings, consciousness, all of those things. At the end, we think, well, person is unfindable, right? And we get some sense of vacuity, kind of fuzzy, wizzy, kind of, and we think that's emptiness. But actually, that emptiness, it says here, I made it. Thus, this sort of emptiness is an emptiness that destroys dependent arising. Okay? And that's really we have to keep in mind, And Gyeltsen is making his best case. You know what? If you think emptiness is that easy to understand, that a person is not your head, not your tongue, not your whatever all those things, at the end you don't find the person, you think that kind of a vacuity appears in emptiness, okay? Actually, you got it wrong. Because that person exists, he said. I mean, nobody is, denying the existence of the person. So we have to understand, how person exists conventionally or nominally, but does not exist intrinsically, isn't it? And so missing that point is really missing the crux of the matter. So theoretically speaking, it's easier for us to refute intrinsic reality, relatively speaking. Okay, that's not a difficult job. But the more challenge we find is once we refute intrinsic reality, how we assert that things still exist and function, isn't it? That is the hardest job. Once we refute it, it looks like nothing exists at all, but yet everything exists and function. So that asserting the functionality of things, like an illusion, is where the real challenge is. Refuting the intrinsic reality, relatively speaking, is not that hard, isn't it? But the combination of, right, absence of intrinsic reality, but things are functional. That is such a difficult point, and we miss it, mostly.
Kasane rangu chiba rangshi maluba kikba tang. Rangshi mewe kansa la sokpa tingi le sokpa boda nju nyong bola sokpa njoba la. Nyeba tingi dongde, te namsu njo tebi, nyinso ti 시다 좀 송에스 오메타 히니가 니가 이노스 어디 다디 카보스 말디 런시가 사드잖아 에네티 되게 에네 샤시가 줘야 어디 가서도 되레스 어디 다 엄마가 버려서나라 야 찍버려도 근데 찍어 건지 그게 런시 또be 고아디 락바디 렐라 보여서 고아 양타바디 다 강시디디 고아 락바디 라산 걸 차도야 저거라 어디 간다 윤제 자시 런시 매자인 윤제 남샤디자 딜레디다 어디는 가르고 셔더디 디까고 에네 오메타와 다 런시 매장 에네 샤지 렌젤라서 베 샤지 타니 뉴미데 태야 어디다 동이디다 그래 시다점 송어서 시다점도 다 제르무지 디디장라이다 비지 동그 야마를 랍도 보면 시다 야마 소식으로 와 딩서도 다 비지 아셔도 자도 어디서 시다 디데스원다 오메도 또 가가세야 가는 가르스 그 런시 메베소니 고아들데 시다 가고 말지 런시 가서도 잘 윤제셔가 디는 가도 거르시고로 어디서
So Geshe is struggling over all this, thing you find is stated at the bottom of page 302 and top of page 303. And let me read those lines and then translate the explanation given. At the bottom of page 302, it says, still, it is difficult to develop certainty about both. 1. The complete refutation of essential or intrinsic nature. And 2. The presentation of those very persons who lack intrinsic nature as accumulators of karma, experiences of the effect of karma, and so forth. It scarcely happens that someone combines the capacities to posit both of these, so it's very difficult to find the Madhyamika view. This is what it is. We often hear it's very difficult to understand the middle way view. Why? Well, the reason is this, that we may be able to get some kind of an idea about intrinsic reality. We don't know whether we understand the complete idea of what intrinsic reality, some idea of what intrinsic reality, and refute it. That's not that difficult through reasoning. But once refuting that, we still need to assert that things do exist and function. This is where we are not able to do it. By refuting intrinsic reality, we are not able to assert that things still could function in that space of emptiness, isn't it? So that's the big challenge, and this is why we said it's very difficult to understand the Madhyamika or the middle view. So it's very rare who have realized that both, the combination of absence of intrinsic reality and the functionality of cause and effect and karma and effects, and so as Geshe was checking over this, when Rinpoche appeared, my footnote, 14th century, so we really don't know how many really got it, right? Only handful probably. Yeah. Now we are living at a very different time. So how many people got it? We still don't know. So it's very tough, very rare. How many really understood this combination of the things where, emptiness complements dependent arising, and dependent arising complements emptiness. They're not negating each other. As a matter of fact, they are complementary to each other.
텐다시 많이는 따에 예바 시정들 치워서도 조조를 예바 총도 조조를 예바 제다 치워서 따에 예바 총도 너 노메사이스 니가 또 좀소 예바 제바 다 매도 서다들이 그래서 텐데 다 런시 매장 애니 차지 태워도 샤마도나 애니 런시 매발 고아도지 가지께나 되지 애니 게디랑도 tel야 애니 짐충도 그래서 나고 매는 짐가 요마라 저와 미가 살 디비뇽 거데 그 짐가 가면도 어디 충도 그래서다 다 조절이 한데 레기네도다 되게 야 상고시다 땅디잖아 근데 런시 주변 걸 드라마도 제일 런시 매베 건 드라마도 시 세상 강바 야지게도 야지 마셔야 소리시데 애니 인조도 용토 말시 타요 말시 다티
So we are on top of page 303, the second paragraph. So it's very important, essential for us to understand that combination of emptiness of intrinsic reality and the functionality of dependent arising. Yeah? And that's the challenge. How can we posit both, harmoniously? So if we miss that complementarity between the two, then we are going to miss the whole view of emptiness. As Geshe explained more clearly, that if we don't develop the certainty with regard to that combination, okay, then what may happen is that as we focus on the emptiness of intrinsic reality, then it might diminish or decrease our interest and the enthusiasm in the practice or the behavioral actions, creating good karmas and purifying bad ones. Because we think, almost we feel like, well, if everything's empty, well, it doesn't matter really, Do I do good things or bad things? So what does it matter? So we kind of somehow, our discipline and behavioral actions go down as we focus too much on emptiness of intrinsic reality. But then on the other hand, we focus a lot on the action, behaviors, how I have to create a lot of merit, karma, benefit, all that. Then somehow we think that, well, all of these things exist intrinsically, so it ups the intrinsic reality, So this is how, something is out of balance, isn't it? It's just like we don't know how to lift both legs together, one up, one down. One falls up, one falls down, So we couldn't balance it. It's so important for us to be able to have that balance between the emptiness of intrinsic reality and the functionality of dependent arising. Okay? I mean, as we thought about this many times before this, if we think that if something exists, I have to create good karmas, I shouldn't create bad karmas, all of these things exist, and we think they must exist intrinsically, we have fallen into the extreme of eternalism, isn't it? But on the other hand, we think that, well, emptiness of intrinsic reality means nothing exists at all, so therefore, why should I bother creating good karmas? Have fun, Well, now we have fallen into the extreme of nihilism because we just kind of got into traps on either side. So this is why we have to be very careful about our approach to emptiness and understanding the combination of emptiness of intrinsic reality and the functionality of dependent arising.
This is the 공도를 무슨 송 말했지. 때부터 들어가지면 돼. 따와 승기도 대치고 그랬어. 랑가 파고 제시 인간의 양사 용기. 我提供着那些我的说。每样我的样在那人类呀，看在人最终形式现在困这个了，现在中学来要嘛，怕嘛咱的这个是吧？现在应该样在说真的。怕最咱做啥了嘛？第可能是没能杀住我是吧？我听着说起的，看我听着觉得是我的。
So a great master by the name of Kongar Rinpoche said, he gives this metaphor example like, approaching the middle view is really being in the middle, understanding that there are two pitfalls or on both sides. So you have to walk very fine in the middle. You cannot lose balance, otherwise you're going to fall down. And the metaphor he gave is like, you are walking through this narrow path, and on either side is a dungeon. Doesn't matter whether you tip to the right or the left, you're going to be in the dungeon, isn't it? So that's what it is. You have to stay very focused, very mindful, stay the course, and walk very fine, isn't it? But if one side has a hill, well, you can kind of, lean on that and move. Well, at least you can grab on something. That isn't the case. There's no hill here. There's a dungeon here. Well, so, either you tip this side or that side. So you don't want that. You want to be in the middle. That's the walking very fine line here.
This is that because she the thing 지도 들으면 초지 양사지 초지 여기는 양생 드는 조시는 리로 거 기다 내가 믿어. 지도서 배우들이 시작했어요.
So if we only have one side as a dungeon, well, maybe it's not a big problem. We can be very careful, we can just kind of take the support of the other side of the hill or grab onto something or maybe take a rest on the island or something, There isn't. It's just both sides are equally bad,
어디서 걸사 탑에 대신 예벌의 양도랑 어쩌면 돈도다 딱다데 ngô yabatay thar tongla se yana ngô no tongtam tuinshi ba tabji tongba jembi kundep tang cheda de ngô mebatay se tata thar tong ino se oda cheda chedan de man jing신은 딱다 롱도 de jing신은 cheda 롱도 se 코니 가run지 홍야리 미지 가지다 당긴 나기 어디 람기디 너무도 다치 홍야로 어디 중요하면 좀 말지
So we really are not given much of an option. We have to learn how to walk very carefully in the middle of the road, so to speak. Okay? Because both sides are pitfalls of the dungeons. So what happens is, if we kind of follow the view of intrinsic reality, then we are really caught up in that what we call fabricated view, isn't it? And that's the view of eternalism. Okay, we get trapped there. But on the other hand, if we deny the conventional existence of things, everything, there's another trap, and this is like underestimation, casting aspersion onto the phenomena that really exists, isn't it? So either side is not a better choice here, So we really have to, as Geshe is really chuckling over this, we got to just learn to stay in the middle. We have no other option here,
Because the data thing is Javole, Teze, Digme, Tobjun Dembaye, Javati, Tingzi, Shon the Che, Sibendo, Melantabute, Della, Major Suyang, Shua, Simjin, Medo, Sosa, Chinite, Chundanan, or Chishinda, Yamatabu, Nange, Londadi, Shin Dawan Dashing. Mükühin mingan jigden de ya hinne jigden hin de portion do mejang le nam le shi na ne na ya shi me sa da khowa na ya karna jebu mi number mai cheba minjurte le sa meje neva 타자 미 대한 신의 레버 민주르메 신이 시바 소원종 미지 제와의 시와라서 강사기 리베 미니장 최는 점았다벌라 까나게 드분능 중에 레신인 드부 리바 때 뇨와 민주와 메라 신이 시의 레지 이런 드부 강사 신이 어느 초와 현다 뇨와미 마지바다 체바 메바 송바다부스 예반이 고소세 다 가지 간테 다 가지 또베 딱좀 될라 랑시메 또베 딱좀 될라 이 윤제 샤지 강가 야 태야 예바 야군이 선다 오메다 아니고라
So Geshe basically read those stanzas from Samadhi Raja Sutra or the King of Concentration Sutras on page 303. And so basically, it's emphasizing that we should make every effort to understand how things lack intrinsic reality. They are merely labeled. That being the case, they still exist and function. Law of cause and effect functions in the way it does, and law of karma actions functions as it is. If we understand that, then our realization of emptiness is correct realization of emptiness, isn't it? Because it does not negate the functionality of cause and effect and other things.
어디 다 레마시바 체바다 시바시면서 어디 다 렌데컨 도라 마이디 마시바 체바스는 소소 가시면은 아니 양 디부 등은 용나 들어서 요마서 소소 딕바 시면은 아니 디부 등은 용 말서 가시면 디부 대화 용아야 말와 양 강사 현다지 요약 보죠 강사 현다지 디부 용아 요 말와 제가 취미사다 인디카르사 마시바 체바 디니가 요 말서도 어디 소소 셔서 레기 디부 소소 그 땡제 샤니现在的让西面的电力可能到比我这民国的什么，这不晓得我们是吧？
So emptiness of intrinsic reality does not mean the negation of law of karmic actions and results. As a matter of fact, the emptiness intrinsic reality incorporates, right? It embodies, the cause and effect and karma and outcomes. As Geshe explained, that even though things are empty of intrinsic reality, they are merely labeled by terms and concepts, but yet a person goes through the experiences of karma. If you have created good and bad karmas, you will surely experience the good and bad outcomes of the karma. If you have not created any good and bad karmas, you don't have to worry about experiencing the outcome of those karma. Okay? Because that is the power of the law of karma itself, how these things works out. Do good, have good. Do bad, have bad. Don't do good, don't do bad. You have no good, no have no bad. That's how it works out. We never experience the result of the karma that somebody else has created, good or bad. We are only responsible for one's own good and bad karmic action, not for somebody else's. That doesn't come to us, and our karmas don't ripen on them either.
어디 다디 파자 랑가 파고되고 로야 탑기로 가지 세울 sensu다. 예버도 솔는 가 해봤다 리페가 지지 리버 차르디 쇼라스. 그래서 소소리야 데모트바디 나랑 저바디 가지 샤고다. 뒤타고 야고지 무엇이니? 찔리버 샤스. 또 그런 문에대 러히트베 다디오 말 다가 동시 샤야로. 지 샤야다. 동시 리버야 하고 시세거로. 쇼라 Rangi ki mari pe rangi chetara dodo nam lekpar samla ngu sembar chas. Oti gaza ngu sen ene denzi de khande zigdo zinaro khande de oti inji minji lekpar ene nge tambo gaza ngu singure sa de re do. Tene rangi tenda yune chik thai de le menta we chu da. Ti nyeja ke lang wala nuji yulo mek shewa samla 누지 때문에 생예바 정신 타 강사라는 중세장 몇이냐 병예바 때문에 샤데 에 동조라 대다 망도 장스 어다디 초루들이다 강서 다다 땡바네 에니디 랑가 파고되고 도당도 간저서 더보 가장 무지셔고 그랬어 가장 어디 제네 에네 소순지다 르 가데 지도 어디 라투기 되게 이집이 무엇이 심버시고레스. 다들 야보 무엇이선 다코 지야나 희지 죽은도게 이 희는 제바 도고로. 정부 가자 뭐지나? 근데 뭐지알아? 몇몇 세능 세야 되지만 누게 찍대에서 세능 원파연데 유명하고 뭐 가와이나 하고 뭐라. 제가 가자 무엇이 그랬어. 다 좀좀 그다음에 거는 어떻게 하면 지만 살베. 어디 제가 가자 무엇이야? 게셔 그랬어. 그러와. 디센스도 딱 ene density ziana hindu da medu ene cheba shen chedda ta yuna ta chik thadi sid phungba de chik thadi karung mi rosa yamara da o cheda ta los yunge yer sin de shiro mo nangba yamara ta nangba de khaye phungbu sengi de shago de khaye phungbu de ngo chi ba yi khaje phungbu dang chu shago de chu sha de di shen ngone tan de zewe de phungbu zin ni ji mi phungbu ngo re zang ni ji mi chokbal ni me zang 유딩이 매바디 네 접주거라. 어디데 초선이 가자 군지 약보셰. 근데 가자 됐나 나 신지 피게 유딩이 매바 또선 엔타동이 도다 가지로.
So Geshe's explanation pertains to what you find at the bottom of page 303 and top of page 304. So as Geshe said earlier, that the crux of the matter is we have to learn to walk on this fine line by avoiding the two pitfalls of eternalism and nihilism. So then the question is, okay, how can I do that? I want to walk in the middle of the road, not tip to the right or the left. So how can I do that? Well, the number one, as it has been stated many times before, is to get this as best as possible, the clear image in our mind of intrinsic reality or truly existent self, or whatever terms you want to use it. So we have to have that kind of generic picture in our mind. Of course, in reality, what we're saying is that nothing exists intrinsically, self or the person. But that being said, we still grasp at self or person as being intrinsically existent, right? That's the reality. Even though it doesn't exist that way, but we grasp at it to exist that way. So that grasping exists. So it is our job, personally and individually, to find out, how do I see myself or person to exist, and get an idea or image of that intrinsic image in our mind. So as we get clear with that image, now we can start analysis. Before we have that clear image, don't start analysis because it's not going to work. Okay. Now we say, well, self or a person that exists in or itself objectively and non-dependently. Let's say, while we get that image. So with that image, now we start analysis. Okay, does such a self or I exist? And if it does, it must exist in two possible ways, right? Either it has to exist as one with my aggregates, being identical with my aggregates, or it must exist as being different or separate from the aggregate. Those are the only two possibilities. And when we look at many non-Buddhist schools of thought, there are some which says that self or Atma or the soul exists independent, separate from, isn't it? But the Buddhist schools of thought pretty much, they don't say self exists distinctively from the aggregate. They said it exists among or within the aggregate. Some might said, well, it is the collection of all the aggregates. Others say, no, it is this particular, the aggregate of consciousness. Or somebody said, no, there's another type of consciousness. So all the Buddhists are struggling, many schools are struggling with that to say there's something among the aggregate that is a self of the person. Okay? So now with that clear image of intrinsic I or the person, we start to analyze it. So through that analysis, when we don't find such a self to exist, either being one with the aggregates or being different from the aggregates, the conclusion is that self does not exist in that way. The conclusion is not that self does not exist at all. It means it does not exist the way I always thought that it does. And so once you reach that point, then you really, you understand what emptiness is. It is the absence of intrinsic reality. And it's just like, ordinarily speaking, if we are trying to look for a person called Siring, well, we got to have what Siring looks like is an image. If we have no idea what the Siring looks like, well, we'll never find it, So we have to have an idea of image of Siring, and then we say it's sitting here in the room or somewhere else, right? The same thing, we have to have a clear image of intrinsic reality of a self. And as Bodhisattva Mahasattva Shantideva states very clearly, in the Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Bodhisattva Char Avatar or Chunju, where Geshe quoted from his memory, where he said that if we don't recognize the fabricated sense of I of the self, we will never understand the absence of that fabricated self existence. So that means we have to really have a precise identification of the object of negation in order to realize the absence of that, which is the emptiness.
我在地方都是样子要讲下来了，但一年可是啥，让西买个小老讲堂的些，但听的看啥，他你娘没呢把那完了路有的下去修了，提来说吧的，这边娘不是这边点点小那么了，小了一了下行，让西买吧点点台北铁路那了，也不小我是我听了他。他工作的呀，的开始那康萨他一牛门的是康萨这个，那开始吃呀、倒呀、菜呀，那我先把他们别家养人等人些就我从出国了的，要了的，要么的是里边多个，我从出掉了的，这我从原先的，那他让些一买，他要的。现在他都是决定的，你上了单，他知道当不当不当的如果了他，可越的我是不说的了，你连把出来的要么里边在你就然后了吧，提下他当不当中些的，他提供用个是了的用个他。
So how do we walk on this fine line called the middle way or the muddy make, avoiding the two pitfalls? is on the one hand, as we said, we have to have a clear image of intrinsic reality from the beginning. And with that in our mind, we should analyze whether self or I exists in that mode, whether it exists as one with the aggregates or different with the aggregates. And through that analysis, we could not find such a self, which means that, that the self is empty of intrinsic reality. So that's finding the emptiness. Now, on the other hand, we also have to acknowledge that things we experience through our sensory perceptions do exist, right? We don't need a reason to say that, I can see you, I can hang out with you, I can eat with you, I can dance with you, I can walk with you, I can do whatever, right? Those things, are verified by sensory perceptions, isn't it? We don't need a reason to say, like, you exist, hey, I like you, I don't like you, all of that, because those things exist, And on that level, we said the law of cause and effect functions. And so if we kind of think about these two sides of the same sort of a coin, so to speak, that on the one hand, we need all the reasoning and analysis to refute the intrinsic reality. On the other hand, we affirm that you and I exist, we hang out together, we do things together, all of those things. Then I think we started to get a sense of what merely labeled means, isn't it? Things don't exist intrinsically, yet they exist and function. What does that mean? So, so then it comes to, merely labeled through terms and concepts. That's how they exist. That's how they function.
Well, this is what Karsa took some that did it. Don't you say, in the regret of the days that the Kalema Jam Jogo, that the Tanya the other the Kalasi Jam, once a Gongosum Koron 12 days. Call you me, Jeva Sugar, Silver, Musum go to the Ora. She had the Musum to the Yoreti, Shenago, you don't have the country here. But any citizen that the much of a del ribbon never show, Pumba chick tied you, the much of a chick tied the Karuti, my mayor, in the Dema model of Shane. Or today you gone like any Karuini, the Dema model of Shane. Karsa, she don't that in a Tomatom Senator, Tayi was this word, Penna Tessigo, Karsa, Jala, that company, Shala, the company, Karusha, and the company in a minute, that period of a tasho, what is also.
So we're still on page 304, right on the top. As Geshe, emphasizes this point, how, we need to train our mind, or at least we have to be very critical in thinking and get a clear image of what intrinsic reality means, and then analyze if things exist intrinsically just the way we think they do. And so through the analysis of oneness and the difference, when we don't find it exists in that way, the conclusion is that they don't exist intrinsically, but yet they do exist. Right? So we are not negating the existence of things. So on the side of refuting intrinsic reality, we need a lot of critical thinking and reasoning and all of that. But on the side of affirming the conventional existence of things, actually we really don't need to use, because that's what we experience every day. We see each other, we do things to each other, all of these things don't require any reasons, isn't it? Because our direct valid sensory perceptions, see, all of all these things, which exist convention. So we are not negating all our experiences of everyday life. You exist, I exist, we do things together, we don't do things together, whatever. All those things are fine. This is what it is, right? We don't need reasoning here. What we're saying is that how we think these things actually is happening, right? Because we think all of these things are intrinsically functioning. That's where we got it wrong. So we have to use the reasoning to refute that notion from within our mind.
Well, this is that Tinin given a Sunyala soba, Seperlan, Minge, Susam, this or that. In Chaji, Musum to show the array. In that Chaji, Musum to Demba made that Demba made in the Chaji, they take Marissa. Take a bed of the Tangan Yonza Zubasha, then Sunyan to the Pesha or Silva. So Sunya Pesha, the Terradova. She has a good Zumba to go the Caris zumba ina chashi teyade sungyen de miki ja ya lega mambo sia yo ba so bane chishi be karta de ro chedon de sigo karishin ganga ko te lega mambo si도도 어디서 와다 그 zumba de zumba ina 그 lega mambo sia 지워라 어디서 와
No. Oh, I think I forgot to translate another example giving Geshe will be for like say, when we have clear image of intrinsic reality or self or phenomena, and then with that in mind, we analyze whether things exist as being identical or as being different, and we don't find them to exist in that way, but yet things do exist because that's affirmed by our direct valid perceptions, everyday life. So it is like, how should I say, so we understand the possibility of how things could function even though they don't function and they, intrinsically. Yeah. It's like, if you're looking for an object, let's say we have only 2 rooms, okay, and we're 100% sure it is in one of these 2 rooms. If we don't find it in one room, the room 1, call it, well, then it definitely has to be in the next room, isn't it? Okay. As Geshe just explained, that our challenge is more to do with, of course, understanding emptiness is difficult, but refuting intrinsic reality, relatively speaking, is not that difficult through reasoning. But affirming that things still could, in the state of emptiness, function, the functionality of dependent arising is very challenging to us. So that's why the examples they give us is the reflection of face in the mirror. Now, the reflection of face in the mirror is not an example of a false, that which is untrue. We call false, isn't it? Because we see my face is reflected in the mirror, but that's not my real face, isn't it? So that's an example of what is not real. Looks like real, my face, but it's not real. It's not only that, to demonstrate that point, but it also means that reflection of the face, although it is not the real face, is devoid of the real face, yet it exists and it functions, isn't it? Because we look in the mirror, it's very functional. I can see it where I need to do the touch-up. I can see, my face. It still is very functional, isn't it? It's not just that, although it's true, that's not my face, but nonetheless, it is very functional, isn't it? I like it, I don't like my face today, whatever, all those experiences, So this is what it is. We have to understand the combination of emptiness of intrinsic reality and the functionality of dependent arising.
Nyomunaba, Hidun to a hand to Hansalaya, Rahi do the Majan, less over down, driven your bow, but the more you later, you will over 10 joy Mingelo, so did that Karsa. She Sunyeti and Melonda, she got told me, Melonjo let the Kegmari, and Karsa. She will let you when you saw you the 10 days at the shadow. She said 10 days, I said the queen 10 days, and the queen saw Sana. Anything Miki get to Miki much Lego Mamusia be she was that she don't see a Ganzetta. That's the same as the Gagamara, the Chihuahua. What is it? Lego Mamushito, sure.
So what you find stated in the second paragraph on page 3 of 4 is if we look at the example given, which is reflection of face in a mirror. Okay. Well, that possibility is due to a combination of different factors, isn't it? There has to be a mirror. The mirror has to be a good mirror, right? If the mirror exists, but if there's no face in front of the mirror, there's no reflection either. Well, there's a face, but you have no mirror, so I don't know what my face look like, isn't it? So the face and the mirror, and they have to come together. That coming together is a dependent arising, isn't it? Because of dependency, that now the face can reflect, because the mirror has the ability to reflect you, right? So through the combination of that, we can see the reflection of face in the mirror, and we know my face is not in the mirror, but nonetheless, it is very helpful. I can do touch-up, I can do pedicure, manicure, whatever, I can do all of that. But actually, he said that, I didn't make that one up. So in the same way, things don't exist intrinsically, but yet they function like reflection of face in a mirror, like an illusion.
어디서 다다 숭예세야 된 것도 무슨 또 가지라 봐. 레세야도 돼 무슨 또 봐. 세다 티샤니 숭예도 빼자고도 봐.
They use examples that we find it easy to relate, like an illusion or magic, or like reflection, because these things don't need big reasoning or thinking, right? Because we know, how it works. But then if we, use examples of karma like that, then it will be very subtle, right? How the karmas can produce their results, and in the next life, well, that's a big headache. I don't know what's next life, right? So, So we will stop there today, and we welcome your questions or any clarification we need to do. Yes.
Thank you, Geshe. So just to be clear, so is it depending so when they mention the middle path, is it then dependent arising that's considered the middle path? Because I guess for the longest time I thought emptiness or was the middle path, but it sounds like it's more of depending arising.
다 양사 니가로 말로뭐 지기데 딱딱 로걸 슬랍으로 와게 람 오마데 마선네 로와게 제가 람 오마 세데 남경 아주 동반이 슬랍샤로 와게 제가 람 오마 세 고된 오마디 에네 텐데기 ton다들 왜서로 와람 오마 세제로 와 티 고된 오마디 텐데 세데 랍데 거스거다
람 오마 세난 데스거다 레교 우스드 타니스 말로서 기데 딱딱 릭버들 하고다
라로와
차 저야 될 우스거다
라로와 이네다 코 랍디 남중 아주 아까서게 동반이디 람 오마데 생애로 시시로 와게 텐데서 코디 텐데 고아디 람 오바 고아 랍디 조친 거를 쓰고 그러다
텐데 인상 되세요 다데 고아도 조조 랑히 마르고 데버드와세 투도샤 텐데서야 돼 그 유대만 뭘 좀디선 코니 겨와샤로 어디 산 텐데 있다 이런 누야 되려 봐 우마세야 지던 되세요 타인을 하는 엄마 근데 사단지도 엄마세대 희워를 하는 간가요 또지인서 비게 두고 있는 하장 약보 하장 두자 많이 봐 딱딱하시 또지나 사마자 많이 봐 양사쳐 많이 봐 딱딱하게 세상사를 열어 어디지 엄마세요다
So when we talk about walking in the middle of the path, so to speak, the madhyamek or the middle uma, what it really says is that a path that is free of the two extremes on both sides, because there are two pitfalls, isn't it? There's extreme of eternalism on the one side, and there's extreme of nihilism on the other side. So the middle means we should avoid those two pitfalls or the extremes and kind of stay in them. That is the kind of the ordinary notion of what middle means. But usually, if we can apply it to our everyday life, I think it also could mean moderation, right? When we think about our habits, when this comes to eating, we have to be moderate in eating, right? Don't eat too much. Well, then you get a stomach ache. But don't eat too little. Maybe you don't find enough nourishment, isn't it? So you eat enough, right? Avoiding eating too much, gaining weight, or becoming anorexic or something, not eating enough. But you can see the moderation. So the middle has the sense of being moderate, being in the center, so to speak. So the dependent arising helps us to be able to stay in the middle, but itself is not called the middle view or the middle path. Does it make sense? Or you ask it again? We will go back to Geshe. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I guess it requires more
Okay.
analyzing.
Okay. Yes, Helen.
So I actually have 3 questions, if that's
Sure.
okay.
So be kind and maybe just, if it's too big, give me one, and one, if it's
No,
small, it's okay.
one each,
Okay.
yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
the first one is just, so then in regard to, I forgot how to ask the question, but okay. So what's being refuted is not the self, it's actually the intrinsicness of the self.
self,
That's
yes.
part one.
Okay. Kwan chwa dang wa de ro wa gen nga zo dang da 각자 가세죠, 와게.
어디.
다를 차면 지당 다도 가게요 말was. 다 랑신도부터 가게요 와서. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The second part of it is so then for something to be intrinsic, like not necessarily the self, just anything, to have that image of
Right,
what's
right.
being refuted, then it can't have parts, it can't have time, it can't move,
Right.
it can't change.
Okay.
It just
Has
like
to.
something that's intrinsically
Okay.
existing is
Yes.
I don't
Okay.
even
No,
know how
I
to
got
say
it.
it.
I got what you said. Yes, I got it. 다 그런 지원이 받이 되다. 다기 안서 각자 최초디다 각자 문제 제대로 했어 봐게.
네.
다 랑신 드버 세디기 고든 디로 봐게. 그래서 랑신 드버 이나 다 추 가야 루머로 봐게. 들 차셔 유 초고 말 와서 봐게. 딜이야 아니 지금 아주 뒤기 차사로 디네게 셔요 말 와서 그 유어로 초고 말 와서 어 디네를 배서 다 랑신 드버기 다 아주 직 삼로 코어 봐게. 그래서 유어 온다 딱 wat아서 그러 봐. 랑신 드버이나 아니 유어로 맞죠 봐. 그 차셔 유어 맞죠게. 그 뒤기 깨져 시주메게 디를 그거로 배서.
대화들 그래서 꼭 니제 줘버렸어요. 그게 유진해야 말봐.
나래.
딱 가서 저들했는데 아니 힘서 정말 힘지 있어서 내가 세세 계속 해야 말해.
나래.
어디 근데 지금 코 용야 유진도 지야 해야 말봐.
나래.
어디 있었어?
Yeah, that's right. You know, if something were to exist intrinsically, whatever that is, X, Y, Z, then we cannot talk about the time because we cannot talk about when did it begin, right? Origin. The time has no relevance to it. Then we cannot say, what made it? What is, who made it and how do we make it? Like, we cannot, right? Because it just has to exist simply on its own. So it does. So it should not have any parts. It should not have a time factor involved. It should not undergo any change. Yes.
Third part is then how is emptiness? So this is the part that confuses me. Emptiness is intrinsic, but then for it to become real, I guess it would be dependent on our perception for it to become real.
Okay, so I got that. Okay, so you said, how is that? If emptiness itself is also not intrinsic, how it is real? What do you mean real?
So emptiness is intrinsic. I mean, it exists in and of itself.
Oh, no.
Am I just
Okay. No,
completely
okay,
confused
okay.
there?
Okay, so that's your question. Okay, I'll go back to that. But then, finish your thought. Let's say emptiness is intrinsic. Okay, we'll finish that. Then,
Well, no, I mean, if I made a
Yeah,
mistake
yeah,
there
yeah.
already, then
Right.
fine.
Right. You're already making a yes.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad. Just if it would be existing in and of itself, then how?
Oh, it's dependent upon our perception and things like that. That's what you're
Right.
saying. Right, yeah,
That's
yeah,
where I'm
I got
getting
it.
at.
Okay. I was just trying to understand the whole thought. Yes.
Yeah,
그런
correct
다
question.
좋았은 거죠, 와게. 아니, 가서 그러다 가서 동반이 있어요, 와.
아래.
저 거기서 뭐 동반이 코랑 랑신 루브도 여러 삼천도 와게. 루브 초고 말했을 때 바게.
아래.
저도 간다 동반이 코랑 아니 유럽에 신 가서 루브로 와게.
아래.
유럽에 간저기 유신을 때는 유에서 디글 거로 봐서 동반이 있어요. 코라에 유다디.
동반지세한테
유신을 맞으면 유험하죠, 코라.
동반지세 다 땡데스 다 생겨도 있으나 다 이게 지고는 말해. 다 땡데스는 이게 왜 저거 말아.
동반 쪽으로.
어디 됐어. 동반지세야 때 간도 돈시도 해도 동반지세야 용 거라.
No.
어디 용 거래. 그래서 코로나 배 동반지세야 때 가서 거기서 최제직 된 동반샤고를 매주 시다 동반이 샤요 말와. 그래서 그 제일 분배된 동에는 분발된 용거라고.
라로와.
그래서 그 땡데레고 동반이 있어요.
근데 다디 향에 된 아주 유진을 때려요.
레레.
That's right. Because when we say there is no intrinsic reality, we mean it in every case, right? That emptiness could not exist intrinsically. If it were, then something exists. Then why can others exist intrinsically? So you're right. Emptiness itself is dependent upon many things, including our subjectivity. But when we talk about emptiness, we cannot talk about emptiness in the state of vacuity. Emptiness of what? So we say emptiness of the table. Well, that table is the basis upon which we establish the emptiness of the table or the vase, right? So it's dependent upon that basis. It's dependent upon our subjectivity that is labeling onto it, right? So itself is like any other phenomena, dependent rising. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Geshe. The heart of Prajnaparamita Sutra famously has something along the lines of form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not
Right.
other than emptiness, emptiness not
Right.
other form, which at a superficial level would appear that all the Mahayanas understood the Madhyamika point
Okay.
of view, but obviously the Madhyamika saw some kind of a deficiency or something in that teaching to to develop their point of view, and I'm curious what their view of the
Okay.
Prajnaparamita Sutra was.
Okay. Okay, let me check whether I understood your point. So you said we look at that passage in the Heart Sutra, right? Form is empty, and emptiness form is not and empty, all of that, right? So you said, in general, we would assume that everybody who recite or whatever, look, that they are looking at it from Madhyamika point of view.
Or they would understand it.
They would understand it, right, assumption. But then the question is,
But obviously there was some kind of ambiguity.
oh, ambiguity, yes.
Or something that they needed to propel their own.
Okay, yeah. 알코나 디스 왔다 단단 간저긴 실험 민분을 와긴 수 동바고 동반이 수소 소리 동반이 세면 동반이 수세 많이 세죠 와
아니.
다디 야 베나 치다 다코나 삼지르도 와긴 디 레테위나 아니 가서 사말로게 지 우메람기로 와긴 우메기 따쳐진 따공을 차도요 와서로 와 이내야 즉 늦지 마다 망고 윤거로 와서로 게 고아로 시험을 왜게 디 가르스그서 왔다 디 간데 차버 쓰면 딱 거치 와서 세보다 미도게
나 뜻에서 다 소도 또뭐이 소스야 디고네신 뜻고 네 뭐지 인사죠 말이야 어디 쉬어다 해야지
그래서
뭐좀 똑같아 돼야지 말이야 어디서 다 속이 동이선한다 애들 속도 또 속이 동이 뒤에 소소 제일 좋아요 말이지 그러다 속도 동이 소소요 말아
라레
그러와
라레
속으로 동반이래 더리 동반이 걸어 속이 제일 될 뭐도 지금 거니 카가시니야 속 동이서
카테스케요 말보다
어다네 속으로 네 속 동이서 카가시야요 말아 어디래서 그러다
이나 다디기 게 수동바 동반이 수서디 데셰디다 두다 소스 담아를 잡이
다디디 수도 다디는 뭐 이해 마시는서 뭐 지금 말했어 이는 뭐 지금 있는데 가다가다서 제당 비게 최신 때를 봐야 그 온도 셰네 인데 막 대전도 망고시에도
라레
어디
다들 오메람 콘 타베 캬바케요 말보다 두다 담아를 유산 두다 소스 따지 스마 요식으로
요식으로 다디 먼저 들어와 가서 희진도 저는 지금자 예세야 들어와 어디 혈압님도 되는데 되게 예제 예대 요말데 대제 피지 죽든지 누가 대제 대제 마 해야라 해야 되면 되라래 동반이 레스데 동반이는 식주가 말 강가 동반이 레스데는 마 대제가 디니 해온 거라
So first, Geshe said that with regard to that passage, different schools of thought might have different interpretations of what that passage means, right? Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, emptiness is other than form, form is not other than emptiness. But what that really, one interpretation, is that what that passage tells us that the true truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth, they are of the same nature. I don't know whether it's coming correctly in English or not, but they are nominally different. Okay, they are of the same, we said ngowo nature. Work with that term, but they are nominally different. Okay, now, for example, if we talk about the form is the basis, right? And that form and its emptiness cannot be separate from each other. We cannot say, hey, let me show you. Here's the form, here's the emptiness. You see it? No, because form is emptiness. It's in the nature of emptiness, isn't it? Okay. And so that shows that the two truths, conventional ultimate truth, are of the same nature, but they could only be talked about nominally as being separate, different. So that's understanding about what that passage means. Then we can use, other than the form, any other basis for that. Okay, but different schools would have probably different interpretations of it. Okay, not just only looking from the Madhyamika point of view. Let me.
So my question is about this, the point Geshe has made many times actually, that it's very difficult to have a complete understanding of emptiness and at the same time understanding of cause and effect. And it's about this statement, again, he makes J. Rinpoche on the bottom of page 2 304, where it says that still it's difficult to develop certainty about both complete refutation of essential intrinsic nature and so on. Now, is it really possible to have that? Is it possible to have a correct understanding of emptiness and yet not to have a presentation of how persons who lack intrinsic existence still accumulate karma and all that? It seems to me that this is an impossibility. It's a hypothetical situation, but it's impossible to have that because earlier, Geshe explained how the moment somebody realizes, understands emptiness, I assume that this is the same thing as understanding emptiness. To develop certainty about complete presentation is the same as understanding emptiness. He said earlier that if one has that, then upon arising from meditation on, they don't have to have realized directly, just conceptual understanding of it. They see how phenomena appear as illusions, which is the same as actually affirming their participation in the cause and effect conventional world. So the moment one has a correct understanding of emptiness, of necessity, it follows, it's axiomatic, that one will have also a presentation or acceptance of cause and effect. So to say that it's difficult to have both, it's just, it seems to me that it's not correct because one necessitate
the other.
Yes.
So why is it difficult? Is that
yeah.
Okay,
So it's sufficient. It seems to me sufficient just to understand the intrinsic lack of intrinsic existence. Then the other side will follow naturally.
Sure. Okay, I understood. Thank you. Kona kandi show the deal again. That under the nenga chesho of the karisitu kanliya. Any church in here again. Ani better ranshingi maruba toba the again. Church in any cause ranshingi marubja and chetamje takarsogra the Gujen Wage, Tendegi, Chawachik slasher, table slasher. What the day in so to the Shuji, the Kalako Shuji Sumber again. Says the D condition also the Paran doctrine again. Pena again the Gengi Carsons and a Pena Manzo Diro that you don't want you Chemachi stop in another again. Toma Koran top we get shook up gear again. Carry in Google Sena and Piget and the 10 day charger and give a 10 Google was again. Shumba the Grua. Toma you thought we shook for a gear again. 10 day charger and give a 10 Google was a penataki, Kwangi and the Yamshan Yalan you do on like Chedolia, you might have Nangor again. Neither because of Tonga Tovaki, Chejel, then Konang Gora again. The day even in the Kaku Shibuja said, and Tata Madeva Suchak does again. Tongban you thought with Shugi, calling about the Tengu, you know, again. Then they charge a table. And the toy the couple wrestler, the Galati, get the test, Tata Madeva. Can't sense what to what.
Chaji Tea did that, Muslim the Tongu, that the bed large and the Tonga. Rod Naya Taya and Yaga, Naya Taya, so Chaji dominated the Muslim told the you're the Martisi Shomara. Oh, said that did Tia Ganga the Yunda was our country, young Yungsa Kong to country, Sena, any dangerous, young Mamma in the Yondi or Silver. That young Mamma did Yondi, any Rahit was a rate of Mars, Rahit was the Konosuit of Konago. That Queen got any in it, they made the don't have to do. That this was Karsa. Chaji to take in the country, Demba Yoga, shook symbol Lego. That they made the Kora, you Koran with Kujoja Jimena in Digumaris. Or Tilla that Chaji Tena, you going to Demba go Mare. Zuma in the Chaji Shagayaris in the Jumada to Shawara.
Now, this is get to what past 7 of the Koran this mother. Tongba Chemashi Toba in Nasla, Tongba Toba Shugi again. Cotendes like never Tengu the Wasser again. Kiss Tengu Yovina, and it's under the again this sugar weapon. Ranshin Robakawa did a elaborate the 10 days Hajate with the couple of slabber again. You so toy. Did take me this word.
Did Tata did Mardaya, Ranjit Lela love
Mamma, the mother told you, but the Ranshin Robakaya dick, the Betone, that doesn't do this Lela Greslar. In the Ranshin Robakani. Tongba Dinala and it's such a table to bet Kamushu again.
Togas and said best Sigumari. Come to Tonjo, pick a quarter name at the Lela or Koala or S. In a letter, Rojito says that the courage picket Chashi did not have joy, Shaka. Tomato get them.
That's the Koran to what is a case. That 게 동반이 또 버와
어디.
동반이 저번에 또 차샤로 와게
어디.
냠샤로 또 버와
예.
또 봐 다가랑기 슈기 스와게
예.
텐델이 양게 봐 덴구로 와서 와게 간사 그 비게 나다 제도 이실 제도 레디오 갈게 최담제 가서 규모도 나인 거로 와
어디.
나인도 그 동배 슈그 난 거로 와서 와
네.
제가 그 동바 또 다가랑기 텐델이 봐 덴게 예배 이나로 와게 다다기 겐디송 버와 텐델이야 하고야디 테스 카고르 세저로 와디 딱다 되면 돼서 오게
단다데 되서리. 지도 주long 도세야디 지도 유마도세야디 조 가르세나. 이네 대서라. 농주도 내지 못해 조도거다. 대들 유마도선 대서라.
내려와랑
냠샤 이나다 가든지 가제 당부 동이 또 이네 동이 또서도 장 동이 마도 그 농주다 동이 또서 농주도 유로 찍리는 카가 두고라. 그봐.
라롱
유마도 또거 당부 또 말와.
라레
어디 대서라. 다 들려야 다들 니어 변다 다다 동바 대중을 통해서 동중 때부터 샤샤디 인가 파디 임샤디 텐교모도 강가 샤고도 와. 다 텐데라 동배 고아데 페지 대샤고 어머랑 집에 샤고다. 텐데는 동바에 비차스고 와. 다 심자만 텐데 동배 켈링 말와. 또 동바라 그 대중에 반전세 텐교모도 샤고도 와. 샤고모.
Bear with me. I think I'm trying to get across the Geshe. I think it was something he campaign tagi ke ngam di sumber wage. Tongjo ko achai and it was a dozen test le lag res. In the 10 day the kag res larwa. Tagi ke ko tambo chama nega ke jen yirwa. Kisi tongba ni chema chi to ba inar wage. Di shugi and 10 day la shuma du ngeba chama ngro. Di kangi ke chago marwa. To ba na ke chago marwa.
내 당고 치고 내가 당하다.
Now I think because I have to break it into different pieces, so hopefully that's. Geshe was very particular about the use of the term. You know, he might have thought that I translated. There's a difference between realization and understanding, right? Okay, so he wants I did not say realization. I said probably, hopefully, I did not just say that. So I will clarify that when we are say, approaching emptiness, assuming that we have not understood it, right? It's easier to understand the emptiness it's easier to refute the intrinsic reality and understand that, but it's much harder to understand how being empty, things are very functional. That's much more difficult. But once you realize emptiness as it is, you're right, by the power of that realization, that it will induce it, right? So there is no challenge there. So it's the two different sections, right? Okay, yeah, good. We sorted it out. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay. I have a sorry. I'm almost forgetting. And then getting onto the mesh you show again. So the me kashe tonsha then that six semje mangu tongdo again. The two men came to Naronas. Then they kiruji de la shake me to a Bobby Relo Saki tongdo one. They two men came to Naronasa. Then I'm going to kiru chigua the Jagal again. David is a pala menganji over the two much came to Naronas. I have a number of prayer requests. Number one, as we know, that because of these tragedies happened in our kind of neighborhood, in the Thousand Oak, the tragic killings there. Now, plus all these brush fires, has created so much suffering for many, and I think a number of people lost their lives, and many homes destroyed, and many animals died. I'm sure. So we want to gather, pray for the lives lost, and pray that those who are still struggling, they survive. And then I have a prayer request for here. How do you say the last name? Bobby Rilova passed away on November 4th. Prayers for Bobby, and also one of our students, David, who is in India. I think his father is in hospital, so he requests for prayers as well. So we'll pray for all. Shandong Gong Lu Ye Wen Ye Wo Dong, Chen Dong Ge Wa Sang Be Sang Ye Dong, Gang La Gang De De La De Dong Ba, Zhong Ba Chen Re Se La, Chang Zhen Ru, Om Mani Be Me, 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 Om 어머니 mani beme hon re gyawa di nyodo da chere se on rojo ne dongwa ji ya de salang ge wa shu to je gong la nyombe chomden de san dang de be ngin de dong e se du song de se san ye men ye vidriya ye ola cha se lo on be sha ji ma be sha ji sama go de so Om beja je ma beja samonga de so gyawa de nyodo da membe ge wo rojo ne do wa chi ya ma le wa de sa ge ba ra jo kang ge lo de jin mian din de yin da nam da ra se be jin ye de go chi jin se je yin ye to ga kang da se be zhen ra ma de pen dong dong ye ji se be ro zo gong la bo je da se ya la do je ro da je ro nyu mo nyu lo le ye cha ro zhe zhe je ma re me se dong ye nyu wo jin ye chen se de ne da je sa jue da ze yun de lun zo ye se tu be gu ju ra jang be yang la de o ma ra ba da na di 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 Omara baza na de sende ye ye ra we ze ye da le de mo me ba ra se ka da de jue shun lo do ba lo de mo we na wa ze do se lo de ya ze yu zhong be wa de ge sa bo me ju do me ba ten ba zhen la on do ji zhe be cha ni shu gun page 21 Obeisance to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who holds at his heart scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and free us from the iron chains of our karma, who wills this sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You have been pure from the beginning, who have completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha. I bow down to you, Manjushri, O Marabhasanadi, O compassionate one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. 31. Like the sweet perfume of white lotus, born in the ocean of knowledge, nourishing honeybees, the fortunate being. Your fame pervades all directions. You are proficient and powerful in upholding the precious doctrine. To you, O Lobsang Tenzin Wangda, respectfully I pray.
Nhất tâm kính lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, bậc đại trí ngài điều phục hai chướng ngại, tựa nhật quan lan tỏa khắp mười phương, bậc thực chứng chân nghĩa màu rốt ráo, từ tim ngài Bát Nhã Kinh thủ hộ nhiệm màu, cõi luân hồi chúng sanh thọ nghiệp báo, bị ngăn che bởi phiền não vô minh, sở hữu 60 pháp âm thù thắng, cùng đại bi ngài hóa độ chúng sanh, tựa từ mẫu chăm lo cho quý tử, tiếng rồng vang ngài thức tỉnh hữu tình, thoát khỏi vòng luân hồi nghiệp báo. Tận diệt muôn vàn khổ đau cùng ách nạn, trường tử Như Lai tối thắng toàn giác, ngài an trụ nơi thập địa pháp vân, báu thân ngài trang nghiêm thanh tịnh, 112 tướng hảo Như Lai, đây đầu đảnh lễ Đức Văn Thù Sư Lợi, cúi xin ngài tận diệt ám chướng vô minh. Om Arapasanadi, con khẩn cầu dưới gót sen bậc đại trí, bàn pháp lực diệt phiền não vô minh, được chí sáng có thâm nhập nghĩa màu, pháp vi diệu cùng muôn vàn luận giải. Như diệu hương ngọt ngào từ sen trắng, đàn xanh nơi trí thù thắng đại dương, hàng thiện căn như ông mật thọ nương, hồng danh Ngài khắp mười phương quảng bá, đấng thiện xảo uy dũng bảo tồn pháp bảo vô giá. Nam mô Lốp Sang Tenzin Quang Đắc, xin cung kính trì niệm.
Sanje Jindo Mede Viwa Yi Rogun Nanda Jin Sheba Yu Kanri Rave Gove Shingan De Pendan Dewa Malu Jungbe Chere Zewan Dinzin Yazo Yi Shabe Sidi Den Yu Ji Yedan Guru Rana Mandela Niyando yo